You want to do recursion. The first step in recursion is really just understanding the problem. Um, I told you about, you heard about base cases and recursive cases and all that sort of stuff. And you'll get there eventually, but you need to get there within the context of the problem and understanding what's going on. So let's solve the problem for just one directory. That's the base case, right? So we have a directory, and we go through and we list the files, right? That's what we saw in the little preview. Um, Hopefully, you've given this a shot. But if not, follow along and then give it a shot after this one before we do the next one. So we printed out, is it a directory or not? We're counting the subdirectories. Well, if it's a directory, what do we want to do? Well, let's say count plus plus. For every directory we see, we increase the count. Pretty simple. Not going to solve the whole problem, but let's go ahead and just run it and see what it does. Well, we say number of subdirectories here. We returned four. I'm sorry, we returned three, but it expected four. Well, let's think about that real quick. There's three directories that we see and a fourth inside. So that makes perfect sense. We counted the three that we saw, the number of doors in the current room we were at, if you will, but we didn't go into the next room and see how many doors were there. So when we find a directory, we not only want to add one to the directory count, but we actually want to, oops, we had one, but also add in a recursive call for the number, the subdirectory that we just are looking at, right? So for each directory, for each file in the current directory, if it's a directory, we want to count it as one and then count how many directories are in that subdirectory. Let's see what happens. Oh, we didn't pass. So wait, doesn't match. I expected what? Oh, right. Yeah. So we just added in one plus, but we didn't add it into the whole total account. So is we can either do count plus or we can do plus equals. They mean the same thing. So we saw three different ways of incrementing. We're not quite there yet. I still expect one. Uh, Number of files. My bad. Subdirectories. I knew the first one was going to happen. I didn't know the second one was going to happen. I called the wrong one. I called number of files down here, which was returning zero. Let's call number of subdirectories. Yes, there you go. Number of test subdirectories. Now, this is the answer. Ask yourself, do you understand what just happened? In 3 minutes, we made the answer. And there was some fuss around with that as well. This is the reason why computer scientists, in many cases, love recursion because it's so elegant. I mean, I have one, two, three, four, 5 lines of code here, and I could probably do it in less than that if I wanted to, um, not counting the curly brackets. And I've solved this problem of counting all the subdirectories in all of the whole operating system. I mean, if I said C drive, this could be running and count every subdirectory in my whole computer, right? But do you understand it? And that's where I want you to really get it into methods of debugging. So what happened right here? Well, my first thing, if I want to understand recursion, system.out.println, start directory. I print out what's coming in, and I print out what's going out. So this is a first step of what's going on inside of here. So we can see something printed out. Now, for some of you, this is enough to see what's going on. You see, okay, well, I have something, okay, well, this is zero, and this is coming in, coming out. So others of you, you might need a little bit more help. So I'm going to say starting recursion and ending recursion. You can put whatever text you want inside of there. but just something to help you see what's going on inside of here. So starting recursion. All right, well, we went into the test folder. That's the very first call, very first line, right? Makes perfect sense. And so what happened inside of there? Well, I list the files that are inside of there. And it seems as though then I started another recursion. So what line of code did that happen on? Well, it happens on line 23, but you may or may not see that. So you could always add more if it's helpful. I can add here, checking, F. So I can see each one of the files inside of there. And again, this may help for you, it may not. At some point, you might have too much stuff showing up here, and you can't tell hide or hair what's going on. But remember, you can always use print statements as a way of marking what's happening in your code. So I come in and I start it, and I say, okay, well, I'm going to check the first file I check is A. All right, well, A apparently is a directory because then I make the recursive call to start the recursion of A. And then I check the first file in A, which is 1. And so if you look at the directory, here's the directory I started with, and I go look at A, and I look at 1, and I look at 4, right? And then I'm done with A. I'm sorry, I'm done with the folder A here. There's no folders inside of A. Makes sense. So then I move on to B. And so I'm checking B. I notice B is a directory, so I start a new set of recursion on B. I get the files inside of B. The first file I see is actually 2. So I see 2 before I see D. They're not necessarily always the directories first. I think 2 comes before D in the alphabet. That's probably why it shows up that way, but who knows how the operating system organizes its folders and directories. All right, so then I get to D, and I say, oh, well, there's recursion there, so let me check inside of D. And inside of D, there's the file .5.txt. And then I end recursion on D with 0 folders inside of it. Then I end recursion on B, which had 1 folder inside of it, which was D, right? And then I go through C, and same sort of thing. I go through C, CS3, and then I end C with 0. And then I go to file system test, which is the last file inside of test here. And then notice here, I jump to 4, right? And then at this point, I do recursion on A. Apparently, I thought I did A already. Huh. Seems like I'm doing A one more time. I'm not entirely sure on that. It doesn't change my count because there's no subdirectories inside of the A, but it does make me curious. Why is 1 and 4 showing up a second time? Does it say... oh, it says starting recursion there. So it ends recursion on test A, and then it does, I'm actually curious on that one. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that one. It doesn't change the results, so it's not the end of the world. Maybe I'll look into that a little bit offline and see if something comes up, but I'm assuming it's probably a glitch and nothing. But again, we can see how this happens. Now, if you're not a printout person, if you need to see stuff happen in real time, you can always use the debugger. So you can see I double clicked over here next to 17 and it put a breakpoint inside of here, and then I can hit the debug instead of the run, and then it'll stop at this point. And then I can walk my way through here. So you can see there's step over, and I say start recursion, and then I say 0, and then I go in the file, and I say checking. So the prints actually help me see exactly what's going on here as well. I can see how it works. This is, for me, very slow. I don't necessarily need this. I can read the stuff below faster. But sometimes, if I just can't make hide nor hair, like this last one that's going on, sometimes this is really helpful. So we can see in this case, A is a directory. Now, if I hit step over, it still stops because I have a breakpoint inside. So now you can see I'm actually inside the next one, and I do the folder, and I'm walking through each one of them, and you see then I end A right there. I return the count. And then the count comes back, and then I go to B. And so I actually wanted to walk through this. Maybe we'll see what the other one is. So the end recursion on B and D, and then now we're into C, and then we end recursion on C, return the count, and then what happens? Huh. Oh, file system test. Okay, we're checking the file, and then there's no recursion on that, and then return the count. Okay, no, yeah. So it just seemed to be a glitch. Oh, I bet you I know why. It's because it calls um, a second time. So that's why it was printing a second time. That's where the debugger comes in. That's where we have to sometimes follow through and look. It's because I called number of subdirectories a second time for A itself, which has no subdirectories in it, and there's zero. So that's why A shows up a second time. So you have to be a little bit careful with your print statements that you don't overread them. So there's something I forgot about, and it's a good little sub lesson inside of there. All right, so let me just go ahead and hit play and finish this out, and we can actually see what happened in our program and see what's happening in recursion. Now, it's easier, not necessarily easy, but easier when everything's working. The tough thing is when you think it should be working and it's not getting the right answer, following through the same way and seeing where it breaks down. And that's where printing the starting and ending is helpful. And that's where sometimes you might want to print additional intermediate values like here, or we could print out the count that's coming back or something like that to see what's going on. So debugging is tough. Debugging recursion is tougher. And here's some strategies on how to do that. So, by the way, notice here when I hit debug, it went into debug view. It gave me all these extra windows. I can actually come to the top right corner and click on my Java view to take me back to the simpler one without the extra windows, and I don't have to close them and open them back up every time. All right, so what I'd like you to do now is take a shot at number of files. The stuff we did here is very similar for what you're going to do for number of files, but don't just copy and paste it. See if you can recreate it by hand yourself and recreate the logic, and then use the logic up above as reference, but don't just copy and paste and try and change it, because then maybe you won't quite understand each line as well as you would otherwise. So we'll take a look at that in a second, but go ahead and take a shot now.